Deep within the Border Prince's region, nestled against the Black Gulf and surrounded by mountains, lies the town of Goldmanor. Built on the side of a lone mountain, rich with veins of gold, Goldmanor draws the eyes of many ambitious princes that covet the riches within. None last long, however, as there's always someone who wants the position and has the power to take it. In the winter of 2516 of the imperial calendar, the current ruler of Goldmanor, Oddone Fink, died, alongside all of his courtiers, as his advisor, Merlin Rosenblum, poisoned them in a bid to take the position for herself. Unfortunately, in the process, she ended up inadvertently poisoning herself and passed away after just 2 days. This left Goldmanor independent, as none of the citizens wanted to assume leadership, and the winter weather made it difficult for other princes to sweep in. In spring, the news of Odon's demise spread around the region and caught the attention of many nomadic warbands looking for a place to set up base. By summer, they had organized their forces and began their approach to the region. On the 30th of Sigmazite, 8 would-be rulers arrived in the regions around Goldmanor, marking the beginning of the Goldmanor War. With that out of the way, welcome to my first campaign report. I've always loved the idea of map-based campaigns, and finally I had the time and mental energy to dive into one. Before we get back to the story and telling you how it all went down, I wanted to quickly highlight the mechanics at play so you can better follow what's going on. Like most of my battle reports on this channel, all games are played using the Warbands rules. This was to keep the scope manageable and prevent myself burning out. This video is covering just the first 3 turns, and in that time 4 battles were fought. Outside of the first turn, most turns see 2 or 3 battles each. For the campaign, we are using a combination of the map-based campaign rules from the General's Compendium and the Warband Campaign rules. Instead of each banner on the map representing a fluid army that can be prepared for each game, it instead represents a set warband. Warbands are formed at 250 points and can grow by fighting battles, securing the various ruins around the map, or capturing the territory around Goldmanor. Speaking of Goldmanor, as the central position that is being fought over, it provides one of the 3 victory conditions behind this game. If any faction controls Goldmanor and their own HQ territory for 3 consecutive turns after the first 6 turns, they will immediately win the game. Their continued presence inspires the citizens to accept them, and they can draw on the resources of the town to raise a proper army and drive back the others. If control of Goldmanor or their HQ territory is interrupted at any point, however, the turn count resets. The second way is plain and simple conquest. If one faction knocks all of the other factions out, they win. This can be done either through capturing their HQ territory and holding it for 3 turns, wiping all banners of a force off the map while their HQ territory is occupied, or by killing the faction's leader. Characters use the injury rules from Warbands, so anytime they are removed from the field or end a fight running, they have to roll a d66. On an 11 to 15, they die and their forces disband. Finally, if 24 turns have passed and no victor has been decided, the faction that controls the most territory on the map wins. As the winter approaches and the conflicts die down, the smaller forces can see the writing on the wall and retreat. If 2 or more factions control the same amount of territory, the faction among them controlling Goldmanor wins. In the case that Goldmanor isn't held by any of these factions, a final battle will occur, with all warbands of both sides taking to the field. Factions that don't control their HQ territories at the end of the game are not considered for victory in this way. Now, with some basic rules out of the way and a rough idea of what to expect, let's introduce our factions. This campaign is being fought between 8 different armies, each led by a character with a unique magic item or ability. The first of these is the Bretonnian force, led by Balthazar de Montaigu. He leads a small group of Knights of the Realm and men-at-arms. As word of his rivals reaches him, he dispatches a few messages to the various Bretonnian influences in the region, requesting aid in his struggle to tame these barbaric lands. He rides atop his horse, Lièvre Rouge, and wields the Lance of Might. To his south, through the mountains, comes the Black Orc Big Boss, Kratzaz the Clubber. He carries the biggest club, a magic item that makes him stronger than a giant, each wallop from his club hitting as hard as a dwarf cannonball. Following his bellowed commands is a small group of orc boys and goblins, eager to loot and pillage Goldmanor for its riches. Also crossing the mountains, though this time to the north of Goldmanor, come the dwarfs, led by Vudak Bitterbuckle, a veteran of many conflicts. Bearing the grudges of his forefathers and their many runic items, he comes to take the wealth of Goldmanor to repay the debts of many princes who called it home and slighted his clan in the past. To the dwarfs east, through the forested hills, the beasts of chaos approach. Led by Cinderbane the Scourge, a wargore with an unnatural talent for deception and a finely tuned instinct for laying ambushes, he carries the horn of the Great Hunt to help him organize his beast herds and bestigors. Much like the orcs, they look to Goldmanor not to claim it, but to see it burn for their dark gods. South of Cinderbane's approach, through one of the mountain passes, comes Alice Blumenberg, the Mad Engineer. She leads a small mercenary force of swordsmen and handgunners, and carries into battle a repeater handgun of her own creation, as well as another of her inventions, a rangefinder, to allow her to precisely determine how far away any object might be. While other civilized folk look to Goldmanor as a source of wealth and power, Alice sees it only as a source of limitless funding for her wild and explosive experiments. Along the coastline, 3 ships approach. The first lands south of Alice's position, near the mouth of the Western River. It carries the High Elven mage, Emrake the Earnest. A master of high magic, she carries the Everstone, an artifact with power similar to that of a Power Stone, but that will never truly be expended. She is accompanied by a small retinue of spearmen and archers. Far to the west, meanwhile, at the mouth of the Mayafeed River, among the poison mire, lands a dark elf ship. The warriors and witch elves aboard set about building a camp under the instruction of their leader, Coco the Everbloody, a death hag of the witch elves. She turns her gaze to Goldmanor with ambitions of enslaving the population and turning the whole town into a grand altar to Cain. Finally, landing in the forests to the south is the Lamian vampire Aubrey. Unlike others of her limited power, she is a capable wizard, talented in the arts of necromancy. Where others call for reinforcements, she needs only raise her new servants from the corpses of the countless struggles that have been before. She carries in her hands the Blood Chalice, a powerful magic item that can empower her spells with just a sip. With these 8 warlords assembled and ready to do bloody combat, the fate of Goldmanor will be decided. The distance between their camps is significant, and the first week sees no combat as the warlords move to expand their territory. In the south, Aubrey marches her forces up the Grand Road, past the ruins of the sleepy fishing village it once connected to, and advances on Goldmanor. To her east, Coco expands across the bloody mire, while Kratzaz takes the middle of the Mayafeed River, and Balthazar secures the northern end of the Grand Road, placing the Bretonians and Greenskins on the warpath. In the west, Emrake secures the southern half of the Western River, and moves her forces to camp on the banks opposite the village of Dusty Stockade. Alice moves her forces into the Stockade Hills to the west of the village. Seeing Emrake camped in the distance, Alice moves ahead to make contact with her, and on the night of the 4th of Sommerzeit, the 2 women spoke. They spent several hours conversing about their plans for the region, and their ambitions should they emerge victorious. Both knew that should they survive, they would be forced into conflict eventually. However, their dreams for the region were more compatible than what they expected of the others, and a temporary alliance was formed. The timing on this was fortuitous, as Cinderbane's warband marched into the Terralba Mountains, set on bringing their wrath to Alice's camp beyond Rold's Pass. Through luck, a messenger was passing through the mountains, and saw the approaching beastmen. As his travels took him through the pass and towards the western river, he informed all that he saw along the way, including Alice. While Cinderbane's march continued through Rold's Pass, Alice hurried her men towards it. She arrived on the 8th of Summerslight, mere hours before Cinderbane's forces. With just a few hours to plan, Alice concocted a bold strategy. Her forces moved into the mountains above Rold's Pass and waited for Cinderbane to emerge. Once his forces had fully exited the pass, she and her men descended, taking up positions at the entrance of the pass to take advantage of the high ground and rain lead on Cinderbane's forces. Seeing his retreat cut off, Cinderbane assessed his options. While he could push on towards Alice's territory, he would do so with her forces ever present to harass his soldiers and whittle them down until they chose to fight. And so he rallied his Bestigors and made ready to do battle. Both generals knew that they were facing a cunning and dangerous foe. If either one could decapitate the enemy here, they would save themselves a great headache in the future, and they each built their strategies around this idea. The Beastmen forces assemble quickly, and they take to the field before Alice's soldiers are prepared, covering almost half the distance before her handgunners can open fire. One unit manages to kill 3 Bestigors alone, halving their number for the fight ahead. As they charge across the field, Cinderbane brings his horn to his lips and sounds the signal. Despite Alice's cunning, he had anticipated something like this and left his beast herd behind, securing the rear. Now they appear on the opposite side of the pass and descend upon the flank of Alice's forces. The swordsmen on the flank about face to confront the oncoming herd, while the other flank charges from their elevated position at Cinderbane, easily surrounding the lone beastman. The handgunners fire and kill 2 more Bestigors. Cinderbane faces off with the swordsmen around him, but neither side is willing to overcommit to the offense, and a stalemate naturally emerges. Seeing himself surrounded, Cinderbane's instincts get the better of him, and he flees the fight. The swordsmen give chase, and one of them gets lucky and catches him in the back of the head with his sword, knocking the Wargore down. Elated with their success, the swordsmen charge into the Bestigor, ready to carry their momentum into a sound victory. They succeed, driving the Bestigor to retreat in much the same way as Cinderbane, and striking him down as he flees. Their momentum is short-lived, however, as in the pass the beast herd charges. They manage to strike down all but one of the swordsmen, who flees from the fight. This leads to panic spreading through the ranks, as the handgunners flee, and the sight of the lone swordsman upsets the other unit, sending them fleeing as well. This begins a chain reaction. Alice pulls back, but the herd charges her, and when she goes to flee, she is caught and cut down. The handgunners regain their nerve, but their fire fails to do any damage. When the beast herd charges one unit, it flees and is caught. Some men cut down, while others scatter to safety. This unnerves the remaining handgunners, who turn and flee. The swordsmen, meanwhile, regain their nerve just in time to see that the battle is well and truly lost, and make an orderly retreat to avoid being the next victims of the beastmen. The Battle of Rold Pass was a decisive victory for the beastmen, with only 2 Bestigors killed and the rest merely wounded. Cinderbane as well makes a full recovery. Alice, meanwhile, lost her left eye in the fighting, and 3 swordsmen and 5 handgunners perished in the conflict. She led her forces back to the camp to recuperate, and hopefully dissuade any attempts on their position by Cinderbane. Cinderbane's success in the Battle of Rold Pass attracted more followers to his cause. Despite losing 2 of his Bestigors, he gained 2 new beast herds, totaling 6 gores and 8 ungores. They were not alone, however. The war gore Silvergrip came to join his forces too, arriving in his camp, ready to spread their territory far. Alice was not the only one who benefited from the alliance. With her border secure, Emmerich made her way further up the western river and captured the old bridge. With this choke point secured, Emmerich was positioned to make a move on Goldmanor in the coming weeks. This success coincided with the arrival of another boat of reinforcements. Shabal of Calador, one of the famed dragon princes, arrived, accompanied by 3 of his countrymen. They were supported by a small contingent of archers and made ready to expand Emrich's local power base. To the north, Vudak Bitterbuckle had led his men to secure the eastern fringes of his mountain range before moving south into Karak Kazan, an old dwarf ruin. He and his men searched the abandoned halls, and with their knowledge of dwarf construction, located a hidden vault containing an ancient bolt thrower. As reinforcements arrived in the camp, Vudak sent for a crew to be drafted to work this machine on the field of battle. In addition to the crew, there arrived Othakin and Gathi Braincrag, a married couple of warriors, leading their own little band to join the conflict. Not everything was peaceful, however. In the west, on the banks of the Mayafid River, Balthazar and Kratzaz led their forces into battle. Seeing an opportunity to raid the Bretonnian camp, Kratzaz set a path towards the Grand Road and Balthazar's base of operations. The experienced knight had anticipated such a ploy, however, and moved first, marching his men to meet the Greenskin menace. And so, on the 10th of Sommerzeit, the Battle of the Mayafid River began. As both armies took to the field, the Bretonnians dismounted and dropped to their knees in prayer. They knew as well as the orcs across the field from them that this would be a bloody day, and the butcher's toll would be hefty. Both sides were hell-bent on exterminating the other and seizing the day. As they rose to their feet and began to remount, they saw that the orcs and goblins had begun their advance. They followed suit, bringing their horses to a trot as the men-at-arms struggled to keep up. As the orcs drew nearer, the knights broke into a gallop, and then a charge, crashing into the line of boys. Balthazar saw Kratzaz among them, and bellowed out a challenge, which was met with a mighty roar. The two exchanged blows, landing wounding hits on each other, but neither fell. Around them, the knights struck down a few orc boys, and the unit fell back, fleeing from the knights and managing to outpace them. Seeing their comrades falling back, the goblins resolved to prove their superiority and surged towards the men-at-arms, while the orc boys regained their nerve and reformed to take the next charge. The goblins slipped their shivs into the guts of 2 men-at-arms, who managed to kill 2 goblins in return, before fleeing from their superior numbers. They flee far enough to escape the goblins, before reforming their ranks to fight once more. Meanwhile, the knights charge once more, barging through the hail of arrow fire to crash into the orcish line. Again, Balthazar singles out Kratzaz, but this time neither of them manage to land a blow on the other. The knights kill another orc, and once more they flee from the battle. This time, the Bretonnians catch them, and Balthazar personally skewers Kratzaz with his lance. The loss of their allies sent the goblin archers fleeing from the hill nearby. The battle is won, with Kratzaz laying dead on the ground, though the goblins don't yet know it, as they continue to fight the men-at-arms, striking down another and driving them from the field. As the knights come riding to their aid, the goblins scatter, eager to regroup with their boss. It's only later that they find he didn't make it through the battle, and they slink away from the region, leaving their camp abandoned and ripe for the taking, should anyone be so inclined. With Kratzaz's death, the First Army disintegrated in just the second week of the war. Balthazar's success sees an influx of knights to his banner. 5 Knights of the Realm and 10 Knights Errant arrive at his camp. He takes half the Knights Errant under his direct command and leaves the rest to expand their borders around the camp and secure the area. To the south, another threat is brewing as Coco moves out of the Bloody Mire, heading north to intercept the Bretonnian push. Much like the others, she receives new reinforcements in the form of Cuthuk Grimmantle, a Dark Elf noble. He leads a group of warriors and a small contingent of Dark Riders with repeater crossbows. All of this squabbling and cautious expanding pales in comparison to the moves of Aubrey. She finishes her march up the Grand Road and moves into the region around Goldmanor. The gates remain closed as her forces cannot match up to the assembled militia. Despite this, the graveyard lays outside the town, and Aubrey takes the chance to raise more skeletons for her army, as well as a new force of Black Knights and dire wolves she sends back to the base camp to prepare to expand her lands further. The third week begins with a bloody day. On the 14th of Sommersite, both Bretonnian forces and Dark Elf forces met at the lower Maya feed. Balthazar realizes that conceding this ground would give the Dark Elves a highway into his lands, and that he had to take this fight. Likewise, Coco could see that leaving the Bretonnians to take the land would expose her camp to an unacceptable threat, and both she and Cuthuk marched their forces to intercept them. Cuthuk moved his forces swiftly up the Mayafeed River, stopping as he reached a ford that would allow Coco to cross and combine their forces so they could drive the Bretonnians back together. They arrive with little time to spare, as the Bretonnians assemble on the riverbank, ready to do battle. Balthazar and his men dismount to pray for the lady's blessing once more. He joins with the Knights Errant this time, forming the dreaded lance formation with his men. As he and his men remount, the Dark Elves begin their aggressive move forward. Coco and her forces navigate the ford to try and join the fight, while Cuthuk's men advance and anchor their flank against some rocks in a bid to prevent the Bretonnians from overwhelming them. The Dark Riders gallop up the Bretonnian flank and open fire with their repeater crossbows, but fail to do any damage. Balthazar orders his knights to fan out and try to catch the warriors in the flank, or force them to reform and expose themselves, but they refuse to listen. The impetuous knight-errants, confident in their abilities and eager to prove themselves, charge at the Dark Elves, who turn and flee in response, easily escaping from the Bretonnian charge. Seeing how the knight-errants have exposed themselves, the Knights of the Realm ride forward and wheel around to cover their flank, preventing the Dark Riders from taking an easy victory, while the men-at-arms wheel back to face the oncoming Dark Elves. Coco's forces make it across the ford and fan out to better deploy on the battlefield, while Cuthuk's men rally. The Dark Riders weave between the knights, positioning themselves to catch the knight-errants in the rear, should they charge the warriors again. Balthazar manages to keep his knights under control this time, and wheels them back, while the Knights of the Realm reform to threaten the Dark Riders and force them out of position. The Dark Riders again weave through the Bretonnians, once again positioning themselves for a rear charge, while Coco's forces continue to approach. Seeing the noose forming around his position, Balthazar leads the Knight-Errants in another charge against the warriors, who this time hold steady. The Knights of the Realm wheel and ride between the Dark Riders and the Knight-Errants, exposing their flank and risking their lives to protect the rear of their comrades. Seeing the bravery of the Knights, the men-at-arms are inspired and charge into the Dark Elf warriors. They don't manage to kill any of them, and the Dark Elves kill one of the men-at-arms, sending them fleeing. The Knight-Errants fare much better, killing 3 warriors. Balthazar disdains to issue a challenge to Kothok, seeing the Dark Elf as beneath him, and instead strikes down a warrior himself. Kothok takes advantage of Balthazar's negligence to strike down one of his Knight-Errants. The Dark Elves hold their ground, while the Dark Riders charge into the Knights of the Realm, threatening to overrun into the rear of the Knights-Errant if all goes well. The men-at-arms, meanwhile, are chased from the field, and both Coco and the second unit of warriors advance to get into the fight. The Dark Riders fail to get through the heavy armor of the Knights of the Realm, while Balthazar and Livier Rouge kill 3 warriors, and the Knight-Errants kill another. This is enough to send them fleeing, and the Bretonnians give chase, running them all down. As the Knight-Errants turn and approach the melee once more, the Dark Riders manage to cut down a knight, and Coco and her witch elves go screaming into the fray, leaving the warriors behind her to desperately try and cover her flank. The witch elves strike down one of the knights, and the sole survivor manages to wound Coco before he flees the battle. Both Coco and the Dark Riders pursue, taking them far from the gaze of Balthazar and his men. They charge into the warriors, who flee and manage to escape. Seeing that they cannot catch them, and that soon they'll be surrounded and cut down, the knights decide to leave the field of battle. Knowing that they may return, and that a fresh engagement will go poorly for them, the Dark Elves also retreat, and the Battle of Coco's Crossing reaches an indecisive conclusion. Though the fight was inconclusive, Balthazar was eager to fight once more, and on the 20th of Summersite, he moved forward once again to engage the Dark Elves. Coco, however, was not so eager, and Balthazar secured the region unopposed. Before this, many other forces were expanding across the region. North of the battle, Balthazar's other knights had ridden west, expanding their territory to soon encompass the northern side of the Maya Feed as well. There, they came across a rune-bearer working for Vudak, who dictated terms of an alliance, if they wished to accept it. Despite the brash presentation of the dwarf, the knights affirmed their commitment, with an understanding that it must be approved by their liege, and should he deem the offer unacceptable, they would send word to the dwarfs to inform them that the alliance could not be honored. The blunt and straightforward delivery of this news impressed both the rune-bearer and Vudak when he received it, and with no protestation from Balthazar, the two forces entered into an alliance. In this time, the Bitterbuckle clan continued to expand its borders. Vudak began a march south towards Goldmanor, while the Braincrags took their forces west to secure the mountain range. There, they found themselves on a collision course with Silvergrip, who moved north from the Beastmen camp, expanding their reach into the forest, while his leader assails the humans to the south. Before the Battle of Alisheim could begin, however, more territory was claimed. Aubrey moved west, claiming the old watchtower for herself. In the south, meanwhile, her Black Knights moved to the abandoned port of Greasy Post, a small town long since abandoned for reasons unknown. Knowing that Alice's camp was threatened by Cinderbane's oncoming forces, Emmerke moved east towards his camp, cutting through the abandoned outpost, Dirt Hanging, which she pilfered for the resources to bring a few more men under her command. From there, she was well positioned to attack Cinderbane's camp and relieve the pressure on Alice. Despite her move to assist her ally, Emrakay directed Shebol to move into the mountains to the south, prepared to sweep in and claim Alice's territory in the coming weeks should Cinderbane's assault kill the poor engineer. Though she wished for the best, Emrakay knew well that a tough fight lay ahead of Alice, who rallied her men and readied her defences. On the 18th of Sommerside, Cinderbane's horde descended upon the camp, and the Battle of Alesheim began. Alice's camp was nothing fancy. A pair of watchtowers built atop a hill, with barricades running between them for defense. The area around it was ill-suited to the beastmen's usual tactics, however, much of the forest they relied upon giving way to open fields. But a pair of forests sat on the flanks, providing them some cover to advance through. Cinderbane gathered his herds, now much larger thanks to his previous victory, and concocted his plan. He gave 2 of his beast herds orders to set up an ambush, while he led the largest battle, planning to make his way through the forest to spring an assault. They would sweep through the enemy camp and overwhelm the position to secure victory. With the plan laid out, he took to the field. In her camp, Alice had her own men organized for battle. Each tower was occupied by a unit of handgunners, while she manned the barricades alongside her swordsmen. She wanted to see Cinderbane fall with her own eye, and get vengeance for the suffering his men had inflicted upon her. The battle began as Cinderbane sounded the assault, and he advanced through the woods. In the field, the Bestigors marched through a hail of gunfire, and emerged from the first volley unscathed. Cinderbane sounded the horn, signaling the ambush to commence. From the trees beside Alice's camp emerged one of the beast herd that had snuck forward to the battle. The other had attempted to go around as planned, but failed to appropriately navigate the wilderness, and ended up coming in behind Cinderbane's line. Seeing the oncoming threat, the larger unit of swordsmen hurry into the tower to hold the doors against the assault. The handgunners above open fire on the beast herd, but fail to inflict any damage. Alice and the other handgunners fire on the Bestigors, and each manage to kill one of them, halving their numbers. The Bestigors bellow a battle cry and charge at the swordsmen. The swordsmen duck behind the barricade to take shelter from the wild swings of the Bestigors, before striking back hard and cutting them all down. On the west side of the battlefield, the advance continues, and the beast herd that emerged from the forest charges the tower. Fighting around the doorway, neither side can manage to inflict any significant damage. The presence of the handgunners, threatening to join the fight and outnumber the Gors and Ungors if they enter, is enough to give them second thoughts, and they flee. The swordsmen give chase and run them all down. This proves to be cause for concern for the beast herd led by Cinderbane, and they turn and flee from the massacre, squandering a perfect opportunity to win the day right then and there. Though they regain their nerve, it's too little, too late. The swordsmen are already retreating back to the safety of the tower. The handgunners also exploit this hesitation, firing into the beast herds and slowly thinning out the number of Ungors among them. The smaller unit of swordsmen make their way towards the tower, ready to barricade the doors themselves if need be. The larger unit continues running back, but it's apparent the herd behind them will catch them, and they turn to fight. The beast herd charges, while the other swings around the towers, hoping to land a devastating charge as the battle begins to wind down. Despite catching the swordsmen in the open, none of them fall in the first bout, and they cut down a single Gor. In the second bout, they fail to do any damage, but one of the swordsmen go down. They manage to hold strong in the face of adversity, and stay in the fight for a while, but with another warrior going down on each side in the third and final bout, they break and flee, being run down. The other beast herd, meanwhile, loses all of the remaining Ungors to the handgunner's fire. Despite their losses, they charge. Cinderbane splits off from the unit, charging at Alice, who turns and flees. She manages to get away, but never regains her nerve, and flees the battlefield entirely. The Gors, meanwhile, charge the tower. Once again, the fight around the tower door proves to be a stalemate, and once again, the Gors break. The swordsmen give chase and run them all down. Seeing the Gors scattered and killed, Cinderbane abandons his chase and begins to flee. The handgunners fire on him and manage to land enough shots to severely injure him before he retreats. Seeing themselves outnumbered and having to clear out 2 towers of soldiers to win the day, the one beast herd remaining on the field falls back to regroup. With Cinderbane injured and most of his soldiers in disarray, any attempt at reorganizing was doomed. He retreated back to his camp and awaited the return of his warriors. The battle had taken its toll on him, however, as the final shot that had landed hit an important nerve, and his axe arm didn't move as fast as it should anymore. Alice, meanwhile, was emboldened by the victory. Her good mood soared even higher as several of her apprentices arrived with the first of what would hopefully be many cannons. She immediately began organizing to push north to reclaim ground lost to the Beastmen. But that is a story for another time. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Every bit helps the channel grow and ensure there's plenty more battle and campaign reports to come, especially more of the story of Goldmanor. I've already played up to turn 6, so hopefully the next video will be coming out soon. Though, it will have to wait, as I've got a video about a game of my own creation to make first that I'm very excited about.